Welcome to What is Going for new thought from the edge of Each week on OMTimes flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. You don't really believe in astrology, do you? Now, that was the question I was ridiculed with over and over again when I started studying astrology back in the 70s. But that was when astrology was still largely dismissed as harmless entertainment, something to be tucked away near the comic pages in the tabloids or only shared in women's magazines. Fast forward a few decades, and as another tumultuous year lurches to a close, with more evidence that governments, corporations, financial institutions and the media can no longer be seen as the bastions of truth we once worshipped, ironically, it's astrology that is providing us with the most reliable guidance and insights to help us set a new and positive compass for moving forward into an uncertain future. Joining me today for an in-depth discussion on astrology, why it's finally earning the respect it deserves, what it can tell us about what's driving the drastic changes we're experiencing, what's behind the pandemic, how long it's likely to last, why all our systems are crumbling, why secrets, corruption and lies can no longer stay hidden, and what we can look forward to in 22 and beyond is Pam Gregory, an internationally celebrated astrologer who achieved the highly respected Faculty of Astrological Studies diploma after 8 years of study and then graduated with the highest honours in her master's course. Pam Gregory is the host of a very busy YouTube channel that regularly receives hundreds of thousands of views, and she's the creator of a popular and rigorously accountable monthly newsletter that provides detailed retrospective evidence of the accuracy of astrology. Pam Gregory, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sandy. A joy to be with you.
You too. Pam, you discovered astrology some decades ago when you emigrated to Canada after university. What attracted you to it?
I stumbled into it really, Sandy, because it was the first week I was in Toronto, having emigrated, and really just sort of stepped off a cliff edge with no job and not knowing anyone in Toronto, but I just really wanted to live in the kind of vast landscapes of Canada. So I arrived in Toronto, and in that first week I joined a yoga class. And at the end of that class, a couple of the girls said to me, "That chap over there is an astrologer." So I went up to him and said, "Look, I know absolutely nothing about this, but I would love you to do my chart." And I went to see him a week later, and I remember it like it was yesterday because I spent 7 hours with him. And he just cracked my world open because he was able to go back in my life and give me dates and times and ages where certain events had happened and the meaning of those events. And it was like this whole kind of landscape or tapestry of meaning which I'd been completely unaware of until then. It was like a deeper state of being that was a kind of energetic architecture to my life and indeed to everybody's lives. This is the case, which I hadn't perceived until that session. And it was just absolutely life-changing for me. And since that time, I haven't stopped studying astrology. And I still study it. I learn something every single day. It's so vast. There's so much to know. And I just really bless the day that I met him and that happened, because I don't know what my life would have been without it. It would have been nowhere near as rich, nowhere near as deep, and nowhere near as full of meaning as it is with astrology. I'm so grateful for it.
And that's the word, isn't it? Meaning. I mean, it does give us answers. It gives us a compass.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it doesn't dictate, it doesn't dictate. The analogy I often use is it's like a sheet of music that you can choose how you play that music. So it isn't prescriptive or dogmatic. It doesn't, we're not fated in that way. But it's like giving you a cosmic weather forecast, which you can either choose to ignore and go out in the rain without a brolly, or you can maximize whatever the weather's giving to you, where you can strategically maximize your opportunities in life. So it's wonderful for that, just practically to live strategically.
Yeah, my teacher always used to say, it impels, it does not compel. Yeah. And the number of times I would try to disprove, no, that's not going to happen. No, that's not going to happen. And every time she was right on target. Yeah. I'm curious to know, Pam, when you went to Canada, was that in the late 80s?
No, it was 1979. No, sorry, 1976. 1976 I emigrated.
Right. Okay. It's just that so many, 1976 was when I started studying astrology.
Good Lord.
But I don't think it made the biggest impact on me until the late 80s. And bearing in mind that we had the harmonic convergence around that time, which seemed to shift a lot of consciousness, I just wondered whether that, did the same thing for you too.
I think it's been all the way through. It's just come in surges all the way through, because even though I was very busy in a kind of normal day job, as it were, working in the corporate world for 35 years, astrology was always my passion, evenings, weekends, doing courses, studying, because it was very demanding to, to try and grasp everything. And so, it just came in surges and waves, and continues to do so, because now we're discovering planets that are further out in space, and that's a whole new level of consciousness that we're starting to integrate, which is really exciting.
Well, as I alluded in my introduction, our views and opinions about astrology have changed dramatically since you and I first started studying it. I mean, and, people used to say, oh, it's not true, or, oh, you can't believe in that, or it's, it's just a parlour game, telling your fortune. And the worst one is, well, it's not a real science, is it? I mean, not really. But what we are finding now is it's almost as though we're uncovering new aspects, or we're able to see deeper into astrology because there's a whole new respect for it.
I think that's true, and I think it's partly the nature of our times that people need more guidance, so they're turning to it rather than dismissing it. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I had to call my first book that, You Don't Really Believe in Astrology, because I was asked that thousands of times. But I'd always say, it's a kind of nonsensical question, because it's simply a language, because you never say, well, I don't believe in French. It just is. And astrology is just a language. It's not a belief system. You don't have to be religious or not really. It's simply a language. It's a different cut through to reality, a different paradigm, if you like, a different way of viewing it that isn't visible if you don't have that structure, that language. So it really is learning a language of geometry, sacred geometry, mathematics, but also deep symbolism. And it's just wonderful. It's like a 97-piece sort of dimensional jigsaw, and you never get bored. I never, ever, ever have a dull day. I just go deeper and deeper with it. And I know I will till the day I sort of pop off.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can understand that. So back then when you were studying it, I mean, were you able to see the difference it was going to make to your life and the explosion, your work has exploded just exponentially over the last few years. Were you aware of that?
No, not a clue. Not a clue. I was just doing it because it was just so profound, and it made so much sense that, it gives a different layer of reality, because if at the 3D level, which we very much are at the moment, we're experiencing chaos and difficulty and challenge, at a higher level of reality, you can actually very clearly see the astrological symbolism and patterns that we are meant to be going through this for a particular reason. So it gives you great objectivity, perspective, but also kind of reassurance that even when times are very tough, you can see the meaning. We are meant to be going through this for a deeper and a higher reason. I mean, when my marriage was breaking down, that was a very difficult time, but I could see beyond all the hubbub of that why it had to happen so I could better step into my power, just absolutely what happened. So at the time, I think when I was starting off, I didn't have a clue where it was going to go. I'm still not sure. I just try and get through my days, I think, like everybody else. But as I say, it just gives me such incredible insight and, I think, calmness about life. Even in these super tricky times, I can feel calm because it helps me to see the bigger picture.
Yes, exactly. And again, if you really believe that it impels, it doesn't compel, you can be strategic, as you said, and you can work things so that they suit you better.
Yes, and we co-create. That's why I call my second book How to Co-Create, using the secret language of the universe, because we truly do co-create. When we're playing a piece of music, we are co-creating with that sheet of music. We can play it with a couple of rusty spoons, or we can play it with the London Philharmonic. We can have a tiny life, we can have a magnificent life. We are co-creating with that energy. And I think so often people think the future is set, like a film set, because they'll often say, what's going to happen, what's going to happen? Well, I never know 100% what's going to happen because we are co-creating. It depends on our individual and collective frequency into how that reality forms. The future is invisible, probably more invisible at the moment than it's ever been, but the future is always invisible because we're creating it. And so I've been saying in a couple of videos recently that I think astrology is really only half the picture, because the other half is the frequency that we bring to that sheet of music. And I think that's really important. And that's actually quite empowering, because we move from everything's fated and I'm a victim to I can have influence on this. I'm a powerful co-creator. And I think that shift in perspective makes a huge difference to people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've tested that so many times when I've used astrology and taken advantage of, certain aspects to manifest things that I've wanted to create. And it works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, magnificent. Fantastic.
One of the things that I love about your newsletter is you are teaching people by doing your monthly reviews of the aspects that you outlined the month previous, and explaining, okay, so now this is the aspect, this is what it tends to bring with it, this is what it's associated with, and here's what's happened.
Yes.
And Yes, and I think that that's something that really needs to happen for people to grasp and understand it. I mean, just looking at your December newsletter, who would have thought some of those things, more exposures of corruption, financial sexual secrets, yes, but the plague of scorpions.
Yes, that's extraordinary. It was biblical. It was so literal.
It was. Tell our listeners about that in case they haven't seen that piece.
I can't remember which country it was in. Sandie, it's probably in front of you.
Egypt. It was Egypt.
Okay, even more biblical. But there was a lot of activity in the sign of Scorpio. And Scorpio is about secrets. It's about financial and sexual secrets coming to light. But it is also, Scorpio is the sign of the scorpion. And all of a sudden, at that time, there's a plague of scorpions that appeared in Egypt. I mean, sometimes the cosmos really has a sense of humor. It was so literal. And so that's what I like to do. I like to anticipate the kind of event. It's not like a psychic skill where you can see the event, because, as I say, we're co-creating, but you can anticipate the quality of the energy and the timing. And then the following month, as you said, Sandie, I always say, okay, so what was the proof of the pudding? What actually happened? What manifested with those energies? So it's a great way to teach people. But it also keeps me on my toes, because I have to be accountable in everything I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That for me is very important. And it's a big part of helping people to see that astrology is unfolding in the world in every moment. In every moment. And that's the power of it as well.
Well, and people do need a compass. They do need something to hold on to, something they can rely on, because every other compass that we've had is disappearing.
Yes, it's just collapsing faster than you can say lickety-split. And all the corruption that's coming up now in lots of places across the world. And we are just on the edge. We're on a precipice, I think, of an absolute avalanche of events that is going to start. Could be today, could be tomorrow, could be next week. But December astrology is packed and complex, so is January, February, March. So I think we can all feel being on the edge of just a huge, it's like an avalanche, really, of events in various, one set of events is going to trigger another set of events. A lot is going to happen in the US. All eyes are on the US because we have this really major, what is called the US Pluto Return, that you will be familiar with, Sandie. But what that means is that, this sounds a weird thing to say, it took me a while to get my head around, but every country has a birth chart, and you think, well, that's kind of crazy. But if you think every chart is just literally an expression of the moment, of that moment in time, and the charts of countries are established when the last legal entity was established for that country, constitutional entity. So for the US, it's the Declaration of Independence, which happened on the 4th of December, 1776, Philadelphia, 5:10 in the afternoon, and that chart has been used by millions probably of astrologers, and it's been tested with transits, so we know that's reliable. And in that chart, Pluto, the planet Pluto, is in the second house of the country's economy and constitution, and it takes about 246 to 248 years for Pluto to come right round its orbit back to that same place, which it is going to do in February of next year and all through 2022, all through 2023. We are well into that energy already. And so I think there's going to be, and other aspects back it up. I mean, a lot of aspects are backing that up. So for the US, I think it's going to be huge economic and financial change, and of course, because everything is connected globally, that's going to start ripples across the world. I think it's going to be constitutional change, I think it's going to be political change, and I think it's even going to be geographic change in terms of what is the US made up of. And I think that's going to be very significant. So all of those things are going to be happening really pretty intensely, I anticipate, in the next 2 years for the US. And they will have their ripples, as I say, because if they're question marks around legitimacy of government, that's going to ripple out to a lot of other countries. The economy is all connected. And I've got my eye on at the moment on a very large property company. You're probably familiar with, Sandie, called Evergrande. And Evergrande is hanging on a thread. If Evergrande goes down, that will take down all of the property sector in China, which is 15% of the Chinese economy. But it will also have, as I say, ripples across all the global markets. There'll be a kind of contagion because there's so many loans and debts involved in that company. And it has missed the last 2 loan payments. And currently the Chinese government are trying to raise funds via the Chinese central bank to make sure it's propped up, and it doesn't cut, but it's absolutely hanging on a thread. So it may or may not be Evergrande that triggers it. It may be something else, but we are really into that energy. And anywhere between now and February, that's when but it could be could be tomorrow, it could be Monday, when that really starts to kick off, and that will change so many things. It will reveal, I think, a lot more corruption at high level. That's the process of Pluto moving through Capricorn anyway, and a lot. I want to call next year the year of revelations and revolutions, because I think so many truths are going to come to light, and that is going to wake people up, and they are going to take to the streets in an even bigger way than they have already. I think we could see that really widespread in an even bigger way. That's my sense. Next year has a very different quality of energy to the last 2. The last 2 have been very contracted and locked down, and rules and regulations, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, you can't do that. But there's a shift as we go through this winter solstice and into next year, a really very significant shift that will change the energy. And if you want me to talk about that, Sandie, I can do that now.
Yeah, please do, because I think we're all aware, we can feel it building. More and more people are getting vocal. More and more people are ignoring some of the restrictions and the orders, and are, really pushing hard for their freedom.
Yes, absolutely. We've been very obedient, we've been very compliant, but particularly things like yesterday or the day before it came out that our Prime Minister and a lot of his senior MPs had a big Christmas party last year with no social distancing, no masks, whatever, whereas his obedient populace were severely locked down. Their parents might have been dying alone in nursing homes, but they were all obeying orders. They'd lost their business possibly, and so people look back at that and think, wow, these are the guys setting the rules, but clearly not obeying them at all. They're laughing at us. So that has created quite a lot of anger in this country. I think we have to be very careful I think we always need to protest peacefully if we're going to protest, because some people may want us to be angry, if you follow. Because if we're angry, then that may require more constraint. Are you following me?
Yes, absolutely.
That's what I'm saying here. But anyway, so the last 2 years, astrologically, have been in January 2020, there was a particular aspect, Saturn conjunct Pluto, which to me was just kind of jackboots on the tarmac. I had such a strong sense of complete austerity, hard times, incredible control that we never had in our lifetimes. And this was kind of going back to the 1930s in Germany, really.
Yeah.
And then all of this year, on top of that, we've had a very dominant aspect of Saturn square Uranus. A square is a clash. So Saturn is the government, its rules, regulations, doing things for your safety. Everybody needs to be controlled, whereas Uranus is not a hope of that. It's freedom, independence, sovereignty, autonomy, maverick, I'm going to break the rules. It's the planet of awakening. It's the planet of higher consciousness. It's the planet of the galactic, but also it's the planet of the future, and Saturn is the planet of the past. Now, this year, Saturn has had the upper hand, I believe. And the last exact square between these two at this time will happen on Christmas Eve. But as we go into 2022, that still is loosely operational, but I believe Uranus starts to have a much bigger say in this, and that's the revelation and revolution side of it, because Uranus is to do with the truth, rebellion, revolution, freedom, as I say, independence. It will absolutely bring the sword of truth and clarity into any situation. It will not tolerate any untruth or corruption. So it's surges of energy. It's about bolts of lightning. It is linked to things like EMFs, both man-made EMFs, but also natural EMFs. For instance, because this is cosmologically true, that because there's a drop in the magnetic shield around the Earth, imagine it like a cotton wool buffer that we've had forever, that has now dropped significantly. So the Earth is now receiving much more high-level cosmic and galactic energy. And that, in turn, is causing upgrades for the Earth itself. The molten core of the Earth is expanding, and that's causing the crust to crack, hence more earthquakes, because Uranus is also the planet of earthquakes and volcanoes. It's a sudden eruptive energy. So it's to do with coronal mass ejections, solar flares, M-class storms, that kind of thing. It's very cosmic energy in surges. It's electrical energy. And I was listening to somebody yesterday, I don't know if he's a cosmologist or an astronomer at Colvin College in the US. I couldn't catch his name, it was a foreign name, but he for many years has been studying two binary star systems that his maths tell him are going to collide next year in a supernova explosion. So that is pure Uranian energy. And my sense is not only that this will bring up much more revolution on the streets, but Uranus is the kind of planet that can flip everything because it's so sudden in its surges of energy. It can just flip the whole game, flip the board, flip the picture, and the next day you can wake up and you're in a different world. So whether that's a pole shift, because the North Pole is moving so quickly, GPS systems have to be updated more often, whether it's something like that or a massive coronal mass ejection that hits us and takes out the power grids or something. But I don't know what and when next year, because Uranus is the planet of surprises and the unexpected. So whatever astrologers think it's going to be, it won't be that, because there'll always be a rug pull. There'll always be a surprise. But this is very uppity energy, and you can see it with people already. You know, all over the UK right now, people are saying, I'm not going to comply. I'm going to have the Christmas I want, not the Christmas that's been dictated to me as last year. So it's a more unstable energy, and so events are going to be happening very quickly. It's going to be a much more dramatic, fast-moving year. And things that we have known as foundational in our lives, maybe our home, our job, the systems, education, legal, political, medical, the whole lot is going to crumble, the whole lot. And a lot of that crumbling is going to happen by the end of next year. And that may be very scary in one way, but there's another beautiful aspect, which I'll talk about, if you want me to, Sandie, in a moment, about what's coming that is so exciting. Because Uranus is also the planet of excitement, but it's not steady, it's not stable.
Well, I do want you to talk about that, but let's take a quick break now, and then we can dive straight back into it afterwards. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with internationally celebrated professional astrologer Pam Gregory, whose busy YouTube channel and wildly popular monthly newsletter regularly receive hundreds of thousands of views. We'll be back with more from Pam Gregory after the break.
The future of internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Vox Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Join me every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio for Vox Novus, the new voice.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes' flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And my passion is helping people like you find credible answers to your deepest spiritual questions. As an author, editor, TV radio host, and 13 times book judge, I've read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, so I know what's worth reading and what's not, which is why I founded the No BS Spiritual Book Club, to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who've walked this path before you. There's no catch, no joining fees, and no BS. Just an ever-growing library of the 10 best spiritual books that helped some of your favourite authors and teachers on their life paths, along with free book excerpts, audios, and video podcasts in which they share the intimate stories behind their lists and their journeys. Regardless of where you're at on your evolutionary journey, you'll find dozens of enlightening and empowering recommendations at the No BS Spiritual Book Club. People like Dan Millman, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Yanda Van Sant, Lee Harris, Mark Nepo, Emmanuel Dagger, Diva Primrao, and Meetin, and many more. So why not join the club? It's easy and it's free at the NoBSSpiritualBookClub.com.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Welcome back. Before we resume this week's conversation, here's a suggestion for those of you who struggle with making important decisions. Check out a book called The Necktie and the Jaguar by retired clinical psychologist, Jungian analyst and shamanic practitioner Carl Greer. In addition to revealing how he tapped into the wisdom and power of unseen worlds for guidance and inspiration, Carl's fascinating memoir offers some valuable keys and some great questions that inspire the kind of thinking that guides you effortlessly on your own path to transformation. You can find out more at carlgreer.com. And now back to Pam Gregory. Pam, let's talk some more about Uranus. I've always found Uranus to be a really interesting sign because, as you said, it really does, it just changes the whole situation overnight. And I've experienced that a few times. So it is exciting. It's also somewhat fearsome.
Yes, it's like on a roller coaster. You can either be terrified or excited. It's that kind of energy. I think it will also really promote communities and collaboration, people coming together, and this is happening a lot all over the world. Like-minded people are coming together in groups, buying land, starting to grow their own food, and basically getting out of the system. So it's very much the planet of collaboration and community in that sense. It's also, because it's in Taurus until 2026, this is going to bring up new financial systems, plural, I believe, not just one financial system, but other systems which are independent of centralized control. Blockchain, digital, that kind of thing. And they will proliferate, but there are going to be some independent ones. And that's really what crypto started as, independent currencies. So I think we're going to have a lot going on in that area. As I say, it's going to break down all the old systems we've known. Homeschooling is becoming very big, certainly in the UK, because people are taking their children out of the education system. And there are a lot of questions, obviously, around political systems, legal systems, medical systems. They're all going to go. We have a beautiful aspect coming up next year, which we can really look forward to, because what's interesting at this time, although there's a lot of collapse, it's almost like we're living on two levels, because on the 3D level, there's chaos and collapse. On another level, people are just surfing the waves. And I listened to a particular aspect of an ascended master, Dwal Kul. The being is called Zachariah. I've listened to him for years, and he has been so accurate. And when I asked him about the energy coming up at this winter solstice, he said it won't just be around the day of the winter solstice. It will be this year from the 15th of December till the 11th of January, almost 4 weeks. And that is an incredible length of time to have this surge of evolutionary energy for humanity. And that's very Uranian as well, of course, this higher energy. So we're going on evolutionary waves now. And this beautiful aspect next year, and all astrologers will be talking about it, is a conjunction between Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces. It's exact on the 12th of April at 23 degrees of Pisces. So if you have anything particularly around 22 to 24 Pisces, or even Scorpio or Cancer, you'll be feeling this. And it's just, well, let me describe it. It's like a huge bubble of light, really. We are going to feel it not just in April, but really the first 5 months of next year. And at a lower level of expression, I think it's important to say this conjunction between Jupiter and Neptune happens every 13 years, but it hasn't happened in Pisces since 1856. Jupiter and Neptune are both very happy in Pisces. It's the ancient ruler and the modern ruler. But Pisces is unlimited water, boundaryless water. So what happened in 1856 was there was a lot of flooding, particularly in Europe, particularly in France. When Jupiter dived into Pisces this year, 2021, from May till the end of July, we again had huge flooding in Europe, particularly Germany and Belgium. So I do anticipate flooding of some kind somewhere, and issues around water, all kinds of issues around water. At a lower level of expression, let me explain that first and then the higher, it can increase people's confusion, any sense of hypnosis or psychosis or delusion. Emotions may be running high, and there could be more inflation because Neptune is linked to oil, and Jupiter expands everything, anything it touches. When you have hard aspects between Neptune and Jupiter, you tend to get a big bubble of something. When this happened in Aquarius, it was the big tech bubble. This could be a big bubble around the oil price, which of course will ricochet onto delivery prices for everything. So we could see quite a lot of inflation around then. However, on the spiritual level, this is beautiful in terms of it magnifies your manifestation ability. It's high-frequency energy. It's about touching the divine, touching the ethereal. It's magical. It's mystical. We feel compassion for all beings. We feel oneness. We want to connect to Source. This is like a big love, big unconditional love. We want to give of ourselves, and how can we be of spiritual service to others? William Blake, for instance, the visionary, had this strongly in his chart. It's actually a trine between Jupiter and Neptune, but it's very linked to visionary, mystical energy and imagination. So this is going to sweep away old structures like a spiritual tsunami. You know, the three... In physics, you can't have this very high level of frequency and lower level coexisting at the same time for any extended period. The lower is always dissolved by the higher. It's called downward causation. And so this is going to be a huge push to accelerate the collapse of the old as well. But people will want to live with more spiritual meaning. They'll want to blend with the divine. And it really is quite beautiful. We'll have to be careful to keep our feet on the ground, but I would start dreaming a big dream for that time. Dreaming a big dream, because Jupiter actually enters Pisces on the 29th of December, which I think, for other reasons, I think we could end this year with a bang for other reasons, because Mars is very strong, but Jupiter enters Pisces 29th of December and is in Pisces until the 11th of May. So if you want to ride that spiritual wave to get to a much higher level of being, a higher timeline, this is going to offer us gifts galore. So start dreaming a big dream, because it's such great manifesting energy. And then after that, Jupiter moves into Aries on the 11th, 12th of May. And this is about visionary spiritual leadership and us becoming spiritual warriors for our cause. And I'd really sort of suggest that you be aware of the light, because Jupiter in June, July next year comes to conjunct a dwarf planet called Salacia. And Salacia in myth was the wife of Neptune. She's mermaid energy, and she's connected to the shimmering light, moonlight or sunlight on the water. And she, for me, is linked to photonic energy, this very high-frequency white light, which we've got pouring onto our Earth because the magnetic shield has dropped. And this is what is upgrading us, upgrading every cell in our body in every moment. We're going through massive physical upgrades, and people have got all kinds of physical symptoms as evidence for that. So this is something we can really look forward to, that can connect us to, these surges can take us to a higher level, but the combination of Jupiter, this visionary spiritual big bubble, and Uranus also wanting us to get to a higher level of being. It's higher mind, it's the superconscious. That is a very exciting combination for raising our consciousness next year, and is a totally different energy, much less stable, much wilder, much more dramatic and fast-moving, but it is bringing the change in to get us to new Earth, which is what we need.
You say on your website, astrology is already reflecting our evolution of consciousness. This is the thing that always interests me. Is astrology reflecting? Is it leading? Are we, leading it, or is it, this beautiful marriage, this dance of yin-yang that, we are informing it and it's informing us?
Did you know, Sandie, that's a really good question, because when I wrote that, I had the same questions as you. Which way is this working? And again, I think it's a co-creation. But certainly I think the planets are discovered by astronomers when we are ready to really understand the archetypes, because the Kuiper belt objects, which largely are orbiting beyond the orbits of Pluto, have a much higher finer energy, much lighter, and they operate on, well, firstly, they're all deeply connected to the powerful life force of nature in a kind of shamanic way, but they also operate on quantum principles. And by quantum, I mean, I was quoting in a recent video, somebody I know, a friend of mine, needed a hip operation. And it was going to be extremely expensive, about £30,000, a lot of money, that's about $40,000. She didn't have that money. She was in a great deal of pain, and she thought, well, I'd have to work incredibly hard, evenings, weekends, to earn that extra money. It's a huge amount of money. Or I could just go out to my favorite trees, set a clear intention, release it to the universe, that money would come in some way, and I never know, we never know the how. And within a month, somebody just gifted her that exact amount of money as a thank you for all the work she'd done for him over the years. That's quantum. The first way of doing it is 3D. We've got to work and push and write a business plan and see the bank manager and get a loan. And that's 3D. That's done. We are going to be operating much, much more at that quantum level of getting very clear on what we want, setting an intention, releasing it stepping into it as if it's already happened, releasing it to the universe, and hey presto, very quickly it comes back to us.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it's got to be a co-creative process, hasn't it? Absolutely.
Yeah. But great question, because I did struggle with that myself when I was writing it. So, so it's woven together. We discover these planets when we're ready to receive them, but equally, from this point on, having discovered them, we are now, because I'm thinking about them, researching them, we are now co-creating. We're weaving that energy into our consciousness and into our futures.
Mm.
Yeah. So
do you follow other methods? I mean, I like to look at numerology, and I've studied palmistry and human design and various other things. And it's interesting that what you're talking about, the Pluto, America, what's happening, this huge change, etc., has also been predicted, or not predicted, but is also connected to the end of the long night, the 400-year plus long night in the Mayan calendar, when the power is supposed to shift away from America to the east. And here's astrology showing this. Here's the Mayan calendar pointing to it. I wonder whether you go and consult anything else beyond astrology to back up what you're seeing.
I don't, simply because of time, really. I'm not a numerologist or a palmist, but what interests me most, I think, is the spiritual side. This whole thing about frequency, we determine our own reality.
Yeah.
The frequency, as you well know, Sandie, the universe is just a mirror feeding back what you're broadcasting. But also I'm very interested in science and the quantum physics and how that is operating. And that, to me, gives me my validation more than anything. It's the science and the physics, the cosmology of what's happening. And the cosmology of what's happening, it's the physics of light. And it's unstoppable because of this drop in the magnetic shield and the Earth moving through the photon belt, which only happens roughly once every 12,000 years, give or take 500 years. That's what's allowing in this incredible high-frequency light. And because it's the physics of light and cosmology, it is unstoppable. No government rule or regulation can stop that happening. And that is what gives me my confirmation, my validation, more than anything. So it isn't that I go to other people, really. I go to thinking about frequency, and I go to thinking about science, I think.
Yeah. And I think we have to, ultimately, because that's where the answers lie.
Yeah. And it's unstoppable. That's what's so exciting, because you're way beyond 3D. The cosmos is in charge here. We're not in our little 3D life. So that's what gives me real confidence that we are on an unstoppable trajectory for those who want to live a spiritual life. And then, we're on the adventure of a lifetime right now. We are just right on the edge. And if we look at the Mayan calendar, which ended at the end of 2012, and a lot of people talked about that, and the golden age is going to be in 2032, which so many people have talked about, and that's Hopi prophecies and many ancient prophecies. We are absolutely that midpoint right now. So we're at the tipping point. I literally feel in these next few months, which are going to be very tough at the 3D level, we are going over the pivot of the seesaw. And as we get into even April, even May next year, although it's going to be a very revolutionary and unstable year, life is going to look very different even by then from what we've had all through our lifetimes. And it's going to feel wild, but if you can turn your terror into excitement and start focusing on what you want to build, I mean, that wonderful Buckminster Fuller quote about don't focus on what's collapsing, put all of your energy and focus into what you want to create, even if it's invisible, even if it's just a feeling of love, joy, hugging, peace, collaboration, even if it's just that, because we are then activating certain emotions which then will feed back to us. Yeah. And if we can do that on a collective level, we really are gathering momentum. The more of us that can do this, we are rocking into New Earth then.
We need to, don't we? Because, I mean, we're seeing so much reversal going on. We're seeing so many countries turning their backs on globalism and reverting to nationalism. We're seeing a lot of, in America, abortion rights. We're seeing so many reversals that we need. We need the compassion and, everything else to come forward to change some of this.
Yeah, absolutely. We're waking up to, gosh, this isn't working so well for me anymore. And also Pluto moving through Capricorn is about deconstructing any corrupt external authority and at the same time teaching us to be our own inner authority. Because the externals aren't working. If they're not obeying the rules that they're setting for us, that's not working. So it brings us back to developing our own sense of anchor, center, and internal authority. And that's a very good place to be as we go through these next couple of years.
It's the only place to be, isn't it? I mean, what else can we trust?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So people are going to want to know, COVID specifically. Do you see this continuing? I mean, some people are saying, oh my God, it's here for life. I don't believe that. But, what do you see? What is the astrology telling us?
Yeah, I do see a lot of it easing again by sort of April, May next year. And I think it's partly once people change their views about the government narrative, and many people are doing that, that in itself will help us all to move beyond that, because I think if you're in fear, that reduces your immune system. You're more likely to become ill if your immune system is lower. So I think it's just getting, the more of us that get way beyond the 3D and all that represents, there's going to be a huge shift. So I see by April, May next year, a lot of this is going to be easing, because I think a lot is going to come out around the narrative of this whole pandemic. It's fire hosing out on alternative media all the time, but I think it's going to start to come out in a bigger way, and that's the shift that we need to make, and it's a big part, I think, of next year. And I think as we get into... Sorry, Sandie.
No, carry on. Keep going.
I think as we get into 2023, particularly around April, was very interesting. Saturn is the planet of limitation and constriction. Aquarius is the planet of freedom, is the sign of freedom. March 22nd, 2020, Saturn moved into Aquarius. Limitations on freedom. March 23rd, most of the Western world went into lockdown. And Saturn will stay in Aquarius until March 2023, and then leave Aquarius. So I think there's going to be an even bigger easing by March 2023, when we are going to start to see a lot more of our freedoms coming back. And from then on, I think it's just going to get better and better into New Earth, which is 2030. The golden age is 2032. So the toughest time is actually right now. We've had two very tough contracted years the next few months, because what I think governments will try and do is to exert more control to try and hang on, last gasp and last grasp of power. Yes. And governments in the UK, I mean, the last day or so, we've had more restrictions coming in again, and question mark, will Christmas happen? So there is this attempt to have greater control. That's Saturn. But Uranus is going to win the day, because Uranus always wins the day because it's the future and it's the further out planet, orbit-wise. So that's why I think there's going to be a lot more resistance to that control, and that's why the whole thing's going to break down in the next few months, which will not be comfortable at the 3D level. But it's going to happen.
I'm very interested in how technology plays a role in all of this, because it's almost like a perfect storm. You know, if we didn't have the strides that we've made in in technology, a lot of the things that are happening right now. I mean, for instance, you talked about the in the news in England the last few days about this so-called Christmas party that happened 10 Downing Street or in Downing Street. We would never have known about that if somebody hadn't taken a video of it on their phone, for goodness sake. I mean, nothing is safe anymore. For those that want to hide, nothing is safe anymore, because we have the technology. And with artificial intelligence, we're going to have a lot more of it. How do you see that panning out? Because many people are afraid of that.
Yes, they are, and I think quite rightly so in that respect. And I think some technology will be very benevolent, things like free energy, a lot of the Tesla inventions. I think they're going to be really wonderful. I think we're going to have some, they already exist actually, sort of light capsules that can help to heal you. There's something called the harmonic egg, and also something called tachyon beds. If you go into tachyon.org, there's one in London, for instance. They exist, quite a few in America. So we've got these light capsule technologies. So technology can be very beneficial for us, but equally, you're absolutely right, Sandie. There's some technology is, I think, less kind to us as humanity. And I think, again, we have to choose. We have to say, no, I'm not going down that route. I mean, for instance, having seen a documentary on the social credit system in China some years ago, I refuse to use my mobile phone on a daily basis. I will never take it with me when I go out. I'll turn it on maybe once every 2 months. And I refuse because I know where that trajectory is heading. So I'm just not going to be making that part of my life. And I know for many people it is, but I'm going to resist being dragged into that trajectory. So I think we have to be extremely wise in our choices. And also, at the end of the day, we decide as the people, the power of the people, what we are going to say yes to and what we're going to say no to. And I think we've got to step into that sense of power in a much bigger way than we ever have in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Because if we don't like something that's coming down the track, it's down to us to say collectively, no thank you.
Yes. And this is the thing that I've always been banging the drum about, is that we are so strong together, and most people do not think that their voice counts, but it does. Yeah. You're seeing some wonderful groups starting to form all over the world, a lot of them in the UK, and it really is Aquarian energy, people coming together, the power of the people together to say very nicely, not aggressively, not violently, no, we are not doing this anymore. And I think that will be a very big theme going through next year. Yeah. Cool. Very good. So you're very positive about next year and beyond, which is good to know. But, we're going to have some work to do on ourselves, as well as, otherwise work on, riding out the storms, so to speak.
And I think the biggest thing, and it's something I'm endlessly banging on about, as you know, Sandie, I think the biggest thing is work on your frequency, because you will automatically self-select the higher timeline or the lower, depending on your frequency. It's just it's an unconscious automatic thing. So if you're in fear, watching the news every night, you're going to be on a lower future timeline than if you never watch the news, which I haven't for almost 2 years now, and say, no, I'm going to work on my frequency, my meditation, being in nature. I'm going to choose the high road. And you do it entirely on your frequency. You just attract it to you, attract the right people, the right circumstances. And that's how we're going to do it, because if you get on that higher road, I mean, I don't feel part of mainstream society at all now. I haven't even been to my tiny local town in 2 years almost. I just am not participating in the system, less and less and less. And so if we make those choices, that kind of social control that we've seen just collapses, because there aren't enough people in it anymore.
Yeah.
So frequency is everything in choosing your future. Your frequency is your future.
That's a great title for a book, Pam. and and we have to end it there, I'm afraid. We're almost out of time. Pam Gregory, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your wisdom and your research.
Yeah, it's been an absolute joy, Sandie. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And if you want to know more about Pam, you can go to her website, pamgregory.com, and thenextstep.uk.com. You'll find loads of information about her books, how to co-create using the secret language of the universe, and You Don't Really Believe in Astrology, Do You? Love those titles. And you can also sign up for her wonderfully extensive monthly newsletter that offers comments on world events and how they reflect the astrology of the moment. And watch some of her many teaching videos. That's it for us from this week. We'll be back again at the same time next week. And once again, Pam Gregory, thank you.
Absolute joy. It's so lovely to connect with you, Sandie. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
You too, Pam. Bye-bye.
Bye.